Hey, good morning. Figured I'd touch on the Twitter cults for a little bit here. So, as I mentioned before, I first encountered my first hardcore Twitter cult was like the bicycultists. Were the bicycle people who would work themselves up into such a frenzy on Twitter, so far as to convince themselves that they were actually saving the world, saving the planet through climate and not driving a vehicle by riding their bicycle. So they honestly started developing savior complexes, like hotshot surgeons and stuff like this. You know what I mean? Because they were riding their bicycles and they were pushing for bike lanes and stuff like that. What I came to realize is that the cult was, and still is, because it's still very much active, the bicycle cult, still very much active, was and still is funded by special interests who have a vested interest in creating more bike lanes, creating more bicycle space, and less vehicle space. You know what I mean? For whatever reason. They could be a myriad reasons. The less automobile traffic, of course, better for the environment. There's a lot of microplastics in vehicle tires and the vehicles themselves. What they don't mention is that there's also 25% of all microplastics come from clothing. I think it's actually the majority of microplastics come from polyester and your Lululemon leggings and anything that's considered synthetic has microplastics in it. So be aware. Try to wear all cotton. I guess if you can. I don't know. Cotton shrinks. What a pain in the ass. Anyways, bicycultists, they're funded. So you always have somebody on Twitter that's like the seed for that cloud to grow. You know what I mean? Somebody that another bicycle fan can latch onto and look to. Look, yes, this is. I'm talking transportation alternatives and your other left-leaning groups who believe that cars are evil, and people who don't use cars are the savior of the world, and that bicycles in that hierarchy are the saviors. But not the delivery bicycle guys. Only the white liberals who do it recreationally and never in the winter. Because you notice these bike lanes are only used by the delivery guys mostly at night and at winter, unless you're on Smith Street in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Or certain there's certain paths where people have been trained to ride their bicycle, like a single narrow street where you can consistently see somebody riding their bicycle. It's Smith Street in Brooklyn. There's probably others, throughout Manhattan. Some of the bicycle lanes make sense. Not all of them do, though. I think they went overboard with taking away some of the lanes and adding in, too many bicycle lanes where it's just all it is the delivery guys. Personally, the delivery guys with their scooters and their e-bikes, I'm fine if they have dedicated lanes for them. You know what I mean? It just, it makes it complicated when offloading and unloading passengers. The thing is, in my vehicle, in my car, I'm picking up old people. I'm picking up people with canes, and crutches and walkers and stuff like that. A dude on a bicycle isn't really helping anybody except himself, is he? Unless he's delivering Uber Eats to somebody. You know what I mean? Or he's delivering like the real deal bike messengers in Manhattan. You know what I mean? Us Uber drivers, we're taking the young, we're taking the infirm, we're taking people who have trouble moving around up and down stairs in the subway. We're taking people who are afraid to ride the subway. These bicycle people, you know what I mean? They're not loading people onto their backs. and bringing them other places. You know what I mean? So, like the whole war on cars and everything, many of us Uber drivers found to be a little bit, quite frankly, insulting. And yes, we do it for the pay. And yes, this guy just pulled out, like, basically into the middle of the street. That woman pulled out, basically, into almost T-boned me. Happened again yesterday as well. People are not attentive. They're looking at the lane furthest from them and not the lane closest to them. Anyway, circling back around to Twitter and how the bicyclists operate through these organizations that are funded to always be seated. So, since they're funded for pushing a certain narrative. They have no reason to tell the truth. They have no reason to stick to the objective truth. They're sticking to what they're paid to be speaking. And again, it's like a myriad of reasons of why they would be speaking this. I ran into a bunch of people who were like patent holders, but also psychologists or biomedical people who are also happen to be patent clerks or patent specialists. You know what I mean? And they seem to be pushing the COVID narrative from 2020. Like, still going over the numbers to convince people that the pandemic was absolutely real, and it was in no way, shape, or form a fabrication of any kind. 5 years later, when from state to state, there's a debate on how real it actually was and what the impact was, even between New York and New Jersey. There was a point where New Jersey, you couldn't tell there was a pandemic happening, and you cross a bridge over into New York, and, it's like night and day. I guess the virus and all the cars moving back and forth between the two places were different, and I'm sure, you give these patent clerks any kind of excuse, and they'll patent you a fucking excuse as to why that may be the case, beyond political coercion and people just enjoying too much the authority that the masks had given them. You know what I mean? People who would otherwise never have that kind of authority or feel like a hero. There was a lot of that going on during the pandemic. So social media definitely had a big role to play during the pandemic. I remember they tried the pandemic with swine flu with George Bush, and then with bird flu with Obama, and neither one really had quite the impact because I don't think people were quite nearly as invested in social media at that point as they were during the 2020 during the 2020 pandemic routine. Also a matter of political convenience. People have an undying hatred for Trump, and if we destroy the economy through this pandemic, we can get our guy in, and then the pandemic will lift, which I witnessed. That's what people thought when Biden got in. The night of, people were like dancing in the street, and people were like taking their masks off, and, pretending like the pandemic was, all of a sudden going to disappear, even though the city was getting rich, right? Tickets, like, crushing small businesses and people going after the political enemies. It was really, really, really bad. Cuomo was a hero one day, and then he turns into a villain the next day. But they said it was Me Too and not over the pandemic. It was over the pandemic. They wanted to cover up the nursing home thing very, very badly. It didn't even make national news for a year. That's how much they covered it up. New York pretty good at covering shit up, or trying to. We're trying to change that slowly but surely. Honestly, the whole political machine here needs to be fucking dismantled because it's rotten to the fucking core. It really does. And if it doesn't, people really need to start paying a heavier fucking price. Mark my words, if something doesn't change in that regard, they will.